Hey, Andy Chamberlain. Today we're going to talk about how to do bass for electronic music. Now, I'm obviously not a music professor. I'm not even a professional musician. But I spend probably too much time making electronic music. Um, and I found some things to be good things, and I would like to share those good things with y'all. So there you go. I am a bit sick, unfortunately. I really wanted to record this video when I wasn't sick, so I waited as long as possible, meaning that I am recording this probably like 5 hours ago. Like while you're watching, I probably recorded this 5 hours ago. Like really. But that's the way it is, I guess, today. It's not too terrible, I hope. But yeah, let's get right into this. So we're gonna do this in kind of like two sections. It's not gonna be like part one and then I'll post part two next week or whatever. All in one video, but kind of two sections. And those two sections are pretty much patches and MIDI. So the sound of the bass itself and what notes and rhythms you decide to write for that bass patch. Okay, so we're gonna get into patches first. And I think probably one of the most important things to say is that you shouldn't be afraid of using lots of patches. A lot of electronic music mimics the orchestration of a rock band, basically. And the thing about a rock band is that you have the same drum set with the same drummer, and then the same guitarist with the same guitar, and then the same vocalist with the same voice, obviously, throughout the entire song. So it makes a lot of sense to also have the same bass with the same bassist all the way through the song. But in electronic music, a lot of that other stuff is going to change, so it makes sense to change your bass too. I know in a song that I was just making, I made like yesterday, I have like 5 different basses in it because that's what it needed. That's what made it sound good. And so yeah, don't be afraid of lots and lots of bass patches. And you don't have 5 isn't necessarily a huge amount. Like you could go more than that. I know some songs only have like 2 bass patches, and then that one had 5. Normally it's around 3 for me. But yeah, lots of patches is good. The other thing is just to remember that electronic music opens you up to a lot more stuff than you could do with just a normal bass. So add filter sweeps, add effects, add resonance, add EQ stuff, like all sorts of stuff. Automations that change the actual patch over time in a customizable way that can like go like concurrent with what's happening in the song. Like that's a really cool thing that you get to do with electronic music, and honestly I don't hear it enough. Like stuff does change like that, but it's something you definitely should take advantage of. Now then, this next thing that I'm going to say applies to all parts of this video. This applies to the mixing, this applies to the effects, this applies to the MIDI, this applies to the patch, everything. Do you want the listener to hear the bass, or do you just want the bass there as a support? Now, having the bass there just as a support is fine. In fact, I'd say most of the time it probably is just a support. But knowing whether you want the listener to hear it or not is crucial to like everything. Because, do you want it to have a sharp attack or not? Well, if you want them to hear it, maybe you want a sharp attack. Do you want a really complicated rhythm that jumps all over the place? Well, if you want them to hear it, yeah. If you don't want them to hear it, maybe not. And it affects like, how much treble do you want? How much bass do you want? All like everything, right? And do you want like lots of filter sweeps going on or not? Do you want the filter sweeps to be gradual, or do you want them to be like, something that goes up and down all the time? All those things center around, do you want them to hear it or not? And what I'm talking about is not another musician, because another musician is probably going to hear it regardless of what you do, as long as they have speakers that can play it. But like just an average random person, do you want them to hear what the bass is doing or not? Okay, central to this this whole idea. So let's get into these patches that you see on screen. So I have 9 of them here. And they basically go from fat to sub, fat bass down to sub bass. And 3 fat basses, here, 3 synth basses, a real bass, and then 2 basses that I consider to be sub basses. One of them is an 808, which I kind of consider to be a sub bass because there's really very few overtones, very little treble. And in my view, that's like kind of the 4 main basic types of bass: fat, synth, real, and sub. But I mean, that's kind of semantics right there. So yeah, let's look at this one. So this is a beauty. The buffer length was a little short, so I was struggling, but there it is. Oh yeah, that's good. That is a good bass. That may or may not be in a song that I'm going to have on the album. Maybe, I don't know. You're going to have to listen to the entire album to find it. Unless I put it on like the first song, which I'm not going to. I'll give you that clue. It's not on the first song. But, you know, you're just going to have to listen to the entire album now. There's nothing you can do, right? But yeah, I love this bass. I'm not going to reveal like everything about it, but I will say that a pitch envelope is how I get that attack. Like, listen to that attack. That little attack there. So that was pretty much just the attack. That's actually the pitch going down an octave and back up really fast. And that's right here. So the amount is negative. That's why it looks like it's going up, but the amount is negative. Anyway, cool stuff. So next, this is Fat Doomy. If you've ever done sound design, you'll recognize that as just a saw wave with a bunch of unison. And that's exactly what it is. If we take this unison off, it's just a sine wave. Or not a sine wave. It is a saw wave without the unison. But yeah. There you go. I think it sounds really doomy. But you could also just call it a unison saw bass. So yeah. This is the same thing, except it has a frequency decay, meaning a filter sweep going down, and a volume decay, which is that kind of thing where it has a sharp attack, but it gets out of the way quickly. So if you want people to hear what your bass is doing, because you're like, oh, I have these like cool notes and rhythms and stuff in my bass, but I also have like other stuff that I want them to hear, this will get out of the way real quick after it plays. So that's, again, something that you might consider. Using this patch instead of this patch if you want the listener to hear the bass. Okay, so then we're off to the synth basses, which is just, you know, a term, whatever. These are plucked mostly. So this is a similar thing, right? And then this one, just the same thing, but with a little bit less. So that one's a sharp pluck, and this one's a creased pluck. And then this one's a retro pluck, because I don't know, it sounds retro to me. Kind of analog sounding right there. Not real analog, though. I know there are a lot of people who are like, that's not analog, you know. And analog synths are cool. I don't have one. I wish I had one, but they cost money, and I don't have money. So, boo bass. Okay, it's a real bass. And then 808, which I called a tunable 808. I keep on reading it as turntable because, you know, 808s and turntables are both common terms in hip-hop. But it's a tunable 808 because it hits the actual tone fast enough that you can use it as a bass, not just a kick. And then sub bass. You know, we know what the sub bass is. It's just that, right? And yeah, so those are kind of 9 types of basses, and most everything that I do is gonna be some form of one of those types of basses. Sometimes it's completely different. Sometimes you get like weird basses. I know there's like some oh, not GMS. I didn't want GMS. Sorry, GMS is cool, but I didn't want that right now. I know there's some stuff. If we go to basses, like there's some interesting stuff. Like, I don't know, what is this one? I don't even remember. Like, obviously, that doesn't really fit in any of them. I mean, that would fit into the or the synth bass category, I would say. But you know, whatever. Yeah. Alrighty, here we are. MIDI. It's time to talk about MIDI. So, what we have here is just a little 4-bar loop with some chords and some drums and a bass, which is, at the moment, very boring. Yeah, doesn't really get much more boring than this. One note, just full measure, one note per chord. Really boring. There is actually a way to make it more boring. Check this out. If we make them overlap a little bit, and then make it legato, which in Harmless also makes it mono. I know you just love to hear me make stuff even more boring than it already is. That's just your favorite thing, right? Anyway, but we're going to make it less boring now. So there are several things. My face is going to light up now, I believe. So several things to look at, because I have a notepad document out now. All right. So the things I have written down are move away from the roots, use space, like the times when the bass is not playing, highlight, and make better the times when the bass is playing, right? So syncopation / interesting rhythm, licks and slides. So licks are just like little melodic things, okay? You know, do 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 do. I know, I'm a great singer, but especially when I'm sick, right? But yeah, little melodic licks, and that's where we're gonna start, is doing little melodic licks, because that kind of includes a few of the other ones, like staying away from the root and syncopation and space. So let's look at that. Now, these first two notes, okay, they are a C going down to an F. And C going down to an F is a fifth, a perfect fifth. And fifths are the most boring interval, basically, because they have the least dissonance when you play them together, and when basses move by a fifth, it's not very interesting. And so those are especially important to split up. Now, that's kind of more of a theoretical thing, that they're less interesting, because honestly, it's not super striking. Like this, like, is that less interesting than this? Like, I don't know. But theoretically, it's really uninteresting. So we're going to definitely add some stuff in there. We're going to add some stuff in every single measure. But what I'm thinking is adding some syncopation. And so you want to stick to notes in the scale. So I'm going to assume that you know how to like find scales and stuff for minor keys and whatnot. And if you don't, then just look it up on YouTube, because there are plenty of tutorials out there. But now I think it'll sound better because we have some bass syncopation. Yeah, I like that. So this goes down to a G. I'm thinking, actually, how about that? Yeah, that's better. So these notes are actually also a fifth apart. And like, didn't we just say like fifths are bad or whatever? And the thing is that yes, but only if it's like the root notes. So what we've done is we've gone away from the actual root notes, and so and that just makes it a lot better. And so yeah, I don't think we're gonna put space in the first measure, because again, to make stuff interesting, you can't just do it constantly. So like, if I'm putting space into my bass lines, I'm not going to put space for like a really long time. I'm going to have a measure with no space, and then a measure with lots of space, and then a measure with like a little bit of space, and then a measure with no space, and then a lot of, or whatever, you know what I'm saying? And kind of like changing up each measure, or every two measures or something like that, is a good way to keep interest, because even if you're using things that is going to make it more interesting, if you just keep on doing that, then it's not interesting because you're doing the same thing over and over again. So yeah, let's look at this now. So I think we can add some space in here, so we can go like maybe like this. Let's try that. Yeah. Maybe like yeah, that's cool. I'm thinking maybe a slide, like a slide in this measure, because we talked about like adding slides. So let's add a slide. Let's go up. Maybe like that. By the way that I did that was with Alt. Just press Alt, and then you can move stuff without the snap. So like even if the snap says bar, you could still move it within the bar. So kind of cool. Little keyboard shortcuts, useful things. So I'm thinking is maybe like a kind of a triplet thing. Or no, that would just be a quarter of a beat. See, that's the issue, is that this bass is kind of has a little bit of a pluck, and normally basses that have a little bit of a pluck don't do as well with slides, but so yeah, and then right there, that's another thing to think about, is like when chords give you a lot of space, when the chords and the melody and whatever is giving you a lot of space, the drum beat doesn't really matter as much as far as it needs to give you space. The drum beat can keep going, but when the chords give you space, that's a good opportunity. So like right here, there's this really long chord note that has nothing happening, so the bass does some stuff there, and it works out really well. Here is kind of the converse. I don't even remember what that means. That was geometry way back when. But you know, it's kind of the other side of it, which is emphasizing the chords with the bass, or emphasizing the melody with the bass. And both are equally cool, I think. So this time, you know. So right there, you know, yeah, kind of trades that. And now I think we have a much cooler bass line. So, yeah. So earlier I said I would explain why those were routed to mixer tracks, and here's why. Just to be safe, I'm going to put that in 3 before I go to the mixer, so you can't see like how it actually works. And then I'm going to, yeah, 3 is routed to it. Ha! You can't see all the effects that it has. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to, first of all, mute that. And then here's the thing. I have this pattern, right? And that's all it is. It's just, you know, a couple notes. But this is a really good way of mixing basses and getting a really good bass, especially for something like a drop. This would be really good. A drop where the melody is the important part, at least. You know, some drops like emphasize like they have a bass or whatever, so that'd be different. But and even in that case, this would be good for the bass. And so what I have going on here is I have the sub bass and the fat bass, and I can like mix them with volume to you know, adjust to exactly what I want. Right? And so I know like a lot of people do that, and it might not be news to you, but if it was news to you, that's a really good technique to use. And then the other way you could do that, if you didn't want to use the sub bass, would be to just use an EQ like this. And then just, you know, raise and lower the sub part of the EQ. That's probably not as good, but yeah. There you go. That's why they were routed there. Little mixing trick. The other thing for mixing bass is side chaining. It's super important to side chain. If you have like a really big sounding snare, you probably want to side chain the snare in the bass, but definitely the kick in the bass. And you can learn how to do that from either of my side chaining tutorials in FL. If you're not using FL, sorry, but you can probably find a tutorial somewhere else for side chaining. My tutorials, they're just like really concise. They're really fast. Like I think side chaining with Fruity Limiter was like 50 seconds or something. So yeah, there you go. As I said earlier, I'm not a music professor. I'm not a professional musician. I'm just a guy who probably spends way too much time producing music. But I found some techniques to work better than others for making bass sound good. And yeah, again, the most important thing, is your listener going to be hearing that bass line, or is it just supporting everything else? And yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.